Hello, let's just make sure this is on, everyone can hear me? Okay. So I'm really honored to be here today at Wingate, and before, what I want to do is tell you a little bit about why I wrote the book, do some readings from it, and give you an update on what's happening in Mali, West Africa today. I know that some of you may not have read the book, so I want to make sure you get to enjoy this as well. And before I start, as I've said in the classes that I've gone to at Wingate so far, and I've had an utter ball here, so thank you very much. Greetings and greeting people and saying hello and going through your day-to-day life with respect is really important in Mali. So there is no way that my Malian family would let me be here and talk to you without teaching you a few greetings in Bambara so that we can start the morning off right. So, to say hello in the morning, you're going to say, Iniche. Can everybody say, Iniche? Iniche. Now, if you're a guy, when I say Iniche to you, if you're a guy, you're going to say, Mba, Iniche. So can we practice that, guys? Okay, Iniche, Mba, Iniche. Now, if you're a woman, that sounds very manly, doesn't it? If you're a woman, if you're a gal, I want you to say, Nse, Iniche. So here we go. Iniche, Nse, Iniche. So now we're just going to do it together. So, Mba, Iniche, and Nse, Iniche. Iniche, Nse, Iniche. Thank you, thank you. So now that we've greeted each other, and in Mali, of course, it would go along for many more minutes, I wanted to thank a few people who've really made my visit special. Thanks to Edwin Bagley, Dr. Edwin Bagley, who first connected with me and told me about his interest in the book and the committee's interest in the book. And to Marissa Wheeling, who has made my visit here so thoroughly organized and comfortable. It's truly been a thrill. And to Dr. Jerry McGee, your president, who I had a chance to talk with yesterday, and it was really nice to meet him. He's a very accessible and special president, let me tell you. And to Jennifer Armentrout, who's really trying to bring the study abroad programs to you through her International Programs Office, and also is the one to serve as a resource for the Peace Corps as well. And then to the students of UCAN, your service organization here, who actually gave me sugar last night at a reception. They bought mellow cream pumpkins for me, and that's my favorite candy. So a special thanks to them and the time that we had together. I'm often asked when I come to universities how I first got interested in people from other cultures and in working and living overseas. I grew up in white, rural, small-town Ohio, but my parents hosted international students from the local university, Denison University, in our home. So I grew up with the smells of Lebanese cooking, the sights and sounds of Chinese New Year, the music of South Africa, where I know a group of students from here is going, and the scenes of modern Cairo, Egypt life. And these international students were really the most exciting thing about growing up in the rural Midwest for me. And they set the stage for my study abroad semester in Paris, France, and for my Peace Corps experience in Mali, West Africa, and really for what I hold most dear today. The stated mission of your university, Wingate, is to develop educated, ethical, and productive citizens at home and abroad. That is a challenge. Being a global citizen, which is an overused term, but which is, I think, what this goal is trying to get at, means leaving the safety and security of belonging to one community, letting go of some part of your identity and past, stretching your idea of self, of family, of faith, of city, and citizenship to truly be in and of the world, and to dare to care about it. I first really felt this excitement about caring about the world when I found out that I was accepted to go into the Peace Corps. And as has been said, I went into the Peace Corps right after graduating from Allegheny College. I was 21, it was 1989, and I was thrilled when I found out that I was going to be sent to Mali, West Africa. And I was thrilled for 3 reasons. One, I spoke French, and French was one of the languages that I could use in Mali since it's a former French colony. 2, I was an environmental science major, and I was being sent to Mali to plant trees to help stop the erosion that the desert was causing. And the last but not least, I had taken a course in college taught by a woman from the Ivory Coast, which is a country in West Africa, and I was fascinated by her and the history of this place that I hadn't ever heard of. And last but not least, you know, I met my husband John in the Peace Corps, so that was the little added benefit that I didn't know about. And of course, I wanted desperately to make a difference. I wanted to halt the spread of the Sahara Desert and stop global poverty. Very small goal that I had for myself. And truth be told, I jettisoned almost all my Peace Corps duties when I met this woman on the front of the book, Monique Dembele, the village midwife, and I started to work with her. She lived in this remote village on the edge of the Sahara Desert in Mali. So before I take you into sort of the first scene I want to read to you, I want to tell you a little bit about Mali. So Mali is a landlocked country right in the middle of that big, delicious hump that is West Africa. It's about the size of Texas and California combined. The upper 2/3 of Mali is Sahara Desert, and indeed, over half of the Sahara Desert is in Mali. So it's very hot, it's very dry. It's really only the bottom third of the country, which is where I live, that is evergreen. And it is green for 3 to 4 months out of the year when it rains. Mali's home to about 13 million people, most of whom live in the small villages that dot the countryside, like I lived in the village of Namposela of about 1,400 people. Now most of Malians are subsistence farmers. And in sub-Saharan Africa, there are 290 million people that live in extreme poverty, which means live on under $1 a day. And most of these people are women and children. But again, when I knew I was being sent there, I was thrilled. So I want you to imagine with me that you've been sent to this small country and you're in this very small village, and it's not 10 o'clock in the morning and 52 degrees. It's 7 o'clock at night and it's about 95 degrees because it's cooler at night than it is during the day. And you are walking along the mud path taking you into the village, and the sky is huge at this time of night because there is nothing to tarnish it. There's no electricity, so there's no artificial light, so the moon and the stars are immense. And all the buildings are built by hand. They're made out of mud bricks. So there's nothing to mar the horizon. All the buildings go up about as high as someone can reach. So you're walking along the village path, and you can hear the sound of donkeys and goats coming back from the fields as they're being herded into the village, and people's conversations kind of waft over the mud brick walls as families gather for dinner. Women are coming in carrying giant pails of water on their head because all the water comes from wells outside the village, and they're pouring the water into basins for cooking and for cleaning the dishes and for bathing. And you can smell firewood on the air because all the food is being cooked over an open stove, and firewood is the fuel. And you smell nuts and sauces cooking. And you walk into the compound where your friend Monique has been working, preparing you tow, millet porridge that you'll eat. And you sit down outside on the dirt floor of the compound, and you're sitting on a little wooden stool, and this big bowl of steaming tow has been put before you. And you're about to dig in when your friend Monique asks you if you would like to attend a birth. And you think for a moment, because you know that the lifetime risk of a woman dying in childbirth or pregnancy in Mali is 1 in 12. Whereas in the United States, it's 1 in 4,800. In Ireland, it's 1 in 47,000. But off you go. How long has the woman been in labor? I asked. Since early this morning, Monique said. Her flashlight traced a yellow stain on the dark earth. A scorpion moved under a rock. I have been with her at the birthing house most of the day. So will she give birth soon? I asked. Ah, God willing, Monique said. You'll see, there will be no rest for your Monique tonight. How old is she? I said, jogging a couple of steps to stay next to her. 17. I was glad to be with Monique. She was not only the village's midwife and sole healthcare worker, but she was also my assigned host. At 24, she was only 2 years my senior, but I was in awe of her knowledge and ability. You're sure it's all right if I come along? You know, I've never seen a birth. Of course, she said, smiling up at me from beneath her blue sequined headscarf. Her voice always seemed poised to break into a belly-rich laugh. A woman is always welcome at a birth, Fatoumata, Monique explained, using my newly acquired Malian name. And I am glad your first will be here with me. Monique's face was youthful, sweet, really. A brown symmetrical disc with arching eyebrows, widely spaced eyes, and a slightly upturned nose, making her look like a kid. She was stocky and walked with confidence, her green plastic flip-flops barely visible beneath her wide, flapping feet. Strapped to her back with a cloth tied over her breasts was her 3-month-old son, Basile, fast asleep. Monique opened the door, and an overpowering stench made me wince and pull back. Monique went straight in, but I needed to linger outside for a moment in the fresh air. The pale and bloated moon was surfacing through the leaves of a mango tree, casting a faint light on the decrepit building. Fatoumata, she called. Where are you? I took a deep breath and crossed the threshold, the tin door wobbling as I shut it behind me. So here I was, 22 years old, a single white chick from the corn center of Ohio. I had spent my entire life avoiding pregnancy and childbirth. I had a college education. I was a native English speaker who knew some French, an absolutely righteous vegetarian with uncalloused hands. And here was Monique, a black African woman, betrothed to her husband at the age of 5. She was 24, but had had 3 children, one of whom had died of malnutrition. She had a 6th grade education and 10 months of medical training, and was the sole midwife and healthcare worker for Namposela and all the surrounding villages. She was a gleeful and devout meat eater. She spoke fluent Minyanka and Bambara and knew some French, so French was the language in which we mostly communicated. And she had calluses like M&Ms on the palms of her hands from the work that she did. I felt as if I was drowning in the smell of flesh, body fluids, and leftover food. Shut tight, the building was like an oven, baking all the secretions and juices into a rank casserole. But here, despite the oppressive heat, women found a rare taste of privacy in an otherwise communal world. In fact, the birthing house was one of the few hallowed grounds where men were not allowed to tread. Jutting from the left wall and dominating the birthing room was an immense concrete block that served as the delivery table. Its gray bulk, illuminated by a single lantern, suggested a sarcophagus. On top of the bare scrubbed surface, a naked woman crouched, strained and pushed, her black skin shining in the dim lantern light. Another woman sat beside her on the slab, supporting her. The wall behind them had a large, worn, greasy spot where countless backs and heads had writhed and reposed. Monique stood near them, watching. Folded carefully on the floor lay a large square of colorfully decorated cotton cloth, a paña, the traditional garment that Malian women wrap around their waists as a skirt. Set out beside the dented trunk that served as a supply cupboard was a plastic tub for the afterbirth, a medical kit in a tin box, and a frayed birth ledger. This was childbirth in rural Mali in the late 20th century. So as I mentioned, Monique was not only the midwife, but also the only healthcare worker. So she not only helped children get into this world, but she also helped them stay here. And as the only woman in the village that had ever been to school, no other woman could read at all. So the written word was not a means of education for her. And if we think about the amount of information that we get through the written word, imagine educating people without having access to that. So she had to be absolutely gifted at interpersonal dialogue, at listening really, really well, and at facilitating group discussions. So the types of issues she was dealing with were malaria, how to treat it and how to prevent it, the importance of drinking clean water so you didn't get parasites, of boiling it or straining it, also talking about baby food and the importance of nutrition in young children, because a lot of times there's not enough protein to go around. So one of the things we worked a lot on together was weighing babies, because it was a way where a woman could really see if their baby was gaining weight or losing weight, and it was an opportunity to talk to them about it. So this next piece that I want to read to you is at the clinic in the village where we weighed babies together and worked, which is a separate building from the birthing house. And the other point I want to make is that Monique did not choose to actually become the midwife or the healthcare worker. She was chosen. The village chief, or the dugutigi, saw something special in her and chose her to do this work, and it was really something that she was meant to do. So here we are, one morning, weighing babies. The last woman of the day was someone I hadn't seen before. She took a small, tightly bound bundle off her back, and I gasped as she unwrapped it to reveal her child. Skeletal, his eyes bulging from their sockets, he seemed barely alive but for the flush of fever. His scalp was almost bare, his hair the scraggly filaments of an old, old man. Around his gaunt neck dangled two grigris, personal fetishes, for protection against sickness-inducing evil spirits. The woman was not from my village of Namposala, and she had no baby weighing chart. She said her child was 2 years old. "Weigh him carefully, Fatimata," Monique said to me. I picked up his body, as brittle and hollow as a worn shell, afraid he would crumble in my arms. I'd read that 2 out of 5 children die before their 5th birthday in Mali, and it's better now, today, in 2009. But now I felt it. 5 kilograms, I said, just over 11 pounds. He made soft mewing sounds when I took him out of the sling, as if he would cry but could not spare the energy or the tears. Monique spent a long time talking with the mother. I watched, switching my attention between Monique and the near lifeless child. When the conversation was over, the mother gathered up her boy and began walking at a brisk pace toward the road. Monique stood still, watching her. "What's wrong with him?" I asked. "He's had many attacks of malaria over the past few months," she said. "It's caused severe anemia and now diarrhea. He's also malnourished." The mother didn't know what to do. She hadn't heard about malaria prevention or drugs. I told her she must go now to the hospital in the larger town of Kuchiala. It's only their medicine that can help. But even then, I doubt he will survive. She's waited too long. I can do nothing. I don't have IVs. I don't have serum. These women must bring me their children before they get so sick. Then I have ways of helping them. So Monique was facing a lot of the challenges that we think of today when we think of Africa. And I'm hit with the same headlines in the papers and the news on TV as you are. When we think of Africa, when we get images of Africa, whether that's west or south or east, we get images of Darfur, Sudan, and the genocide, of Nigeria and the corruption, of HIV/AIDS, and when we see or picture a mother and child, there is suffering. But I'm here to say that that is not all that's happening on that continent today. And indeed, I have an immense amount of hope for what's going on in Africa because I knew Monique. And I saw the power of an absolutely ordinary person with a 6th grade education, but a large dose of chutzpah, humility, and humor, and the absolutely extraordinary things that she was able to accomplish. So I don't have this hope because of Oprah and her $42 million school for girls that she's got going in South Africa, though I think that's a great thing, and I wish her all the best, and I want to be on her show. And I don't have the hope because of the Bill and Linda Gates Foundation. It's about $35 billion that they are devoting for global health, even though they're doing great work. And it's not Bono and his Project Red that's really focusing on HIV/AIDS with all these products that we can buy. That's not why I have hope. It's because I knew Monique. And I know there are thousands of Moniques across West Africa that they don't know how to save the world, and they don't talk in continent-sized dollar amounts, but they've got that buoyant spirit that allows them to do the day in and day out work to achieve the dreams of their communities. And it's the thousands of people here in the US who are connecting with their sisters and brothers overseas and daring to care about them. So those of you who have read the book know that Monique had a huge impact on me and my life. We stayed in touch for many years. I went to graduate school in public health. I had my 2 boys at home with midwives. And we stayed in touch until she herself died in childbirth in 1998, and her 5th child, a little baby boy, died as well. And that drew me into writing this book to tell her story. My husband John and I have made several trips back to Mali since we were in the Peace Corps. The latest was almost 2 years ago, and we continue to see the impact that one person can make. We visited the Cabinet de Soins Monique, or Clinique Monique, the small maternal health clinic and dental clinic that Monique's cousin Maxime started in her honor, and that book royalties and individual contributions are helping to fund. It's not our idea, it's not our plan. We're just matching our resources to meet the goals that they have. We're in touch via cell phone all the time with Monique's brothers, her sister, who is now a midwife and actually at 33 pregnant with her first child, who is due next month. and her brother, who's a village healthcare worker tending sick families, and her 3 children, Genevieve, Basile, and Christine, who are now 21 or 22, 19, and 15, if you would believe it. And they're all in school. They are all in school pursuing a chance at an education that their mom never had. A recent New York Times magazine this past August was devoted to women's rights in the developing world. And the authors of the magazine article, who've also come out with a new book about women's rights, their names are Nicholas Kristof. He's a common op-ed editor at the New York Times. He's always got something to say, and it's always brilliant. And his wife, Cheryl DeWin, write in this article, "Focusing on women and girls is the most effective way to fight global poverty and extremism. For all the worry about how aid is spent, investments in education and maternal health all have a proven record of success." So that is great to know, and it's these small community-based efforts that are making the difference. People ask me all the time, why are you raising money for a clinic all the way over in Mali, West Africa, when we have so many needs and so many problems right here at home? And I ask them back, what's the difference? Where do we draw the line? If community is the people that we care about and we love and we are therefore responsible for, where do we stop? Do you folks stop at the Wingate city limit? Do you stop at the border of North Carolina and South Carolina? Do we stop if we're not giving aid to a US state? I think we here, community members, staff, professors, and students, have to help our fellow citizens expand the definition of who they consider their sisters and brothers to be, of an expanded definition of who we dare to care about, because it does take a lot of courage. And I've got a quote on the wall of my home office by Émile Zola, who is a French novelist. And it reads, "If you asked me what I came into this world to do, I will tell you, I came to live out loud. I learned so much from working and living with Monique and seeing how she had to earn her right to live out loud. And I think this type of work, this type of spirit begins in relationship. It begins in the heart. And you here at Wingate have a stated mission that does not just involve your mind, but it involves your heart as well. So I think you're well positioned to tell the world that it is our story, our human story, and that perhaps service isn't just something that you do in your spare time, but indeed it is a profession, it is a vocation and an avocation. And so I encourage you to think about it as something you do with your life, not something you do after you make your money at your job and then do something on the side, because I think that's really what the world is demanding of us. So this next and last reading, that's one of my favorites to read, really speaks to the human connection and the joy of engagement with the world and the real importance of the ability to be able to laugh at ourselves. Because indeed, when we engage with other communities who we don't know, guess what? We're going to make mistakes, and that's okay. And learning to laugh at ourselves is a really important part of doing any kind of service. So again, this last scene, at the village clinic, Monique and I have finished a day of weighing babies together. Across the dry, flat land, dotted with dainty, small-leafed neem trees, a small white pickup truck turned off the road and headed towards us. Its wheels churned up billows of dust. In a land of donkey carts and bicycles, a car was a rarity, a massive metal beast from another land. Two men got out, clad in the crisp brown uniforms, typical of fonctionnaires or government workers. They wore slacks and open-necked short-sleeve shirts with suit jacket-style collars. Their shoes caught the sun despite a thin covering of red earth. I recognized the driver, a small, thin man, as a member of the Compagnie Malian du Développement du Textile, or CMDT, the largest Malian government agency in the region. CMDT's primary work was the cotton harvest, the village's main cash crop. Its agents were held in high esteem and slightly feared. They were responsible for weighing the cotton and providing the sole source of money, of cash, for many villagers. I think that one is the big boss, Monique said in a whisper. She nodded at the stockier of the two as she put her broom down and dusted off her paña, her skirt. The driver came forward, indicating the other man with a small wave of his upturned palm, a deferential flourish before stepping to the side. "This is Monsieur Jara. He wishes to welcome you to the region." Mr. Jara took 2 majestic steps forward. I fortified myself for an exchange of formal greetings. I was barely able to perform this custom at normal speed in Bambara, let alone with sufficient fluency to impress the likes of Mr. Jara. Then, something about him struck me, his last name. In Mali, Jamus, or last names, were important because they defined one's lineage, which in turn helped to determine one's place within the community. As a Dembele, my name was Fatoumata Dembele, the Jaras were my joking cousins, a custom that dictated good-natured teasing between our families. Centuries ago, joking cousins were actually warring clans, but now the old hostilities had watered down to jokes and tame insults. These tended to run on well-worn tracks. A common jibe was calling someone a bean eater, implying that the person suffered from gastrointestinal distress, the Malian equivalent of a fart joke. Dog eater was also an acceptable insult, a reference to the local tradition of fetish worship and its practice of animal sacrifice. It was looked down upon by certain Muslims and Christians. In this region of southeast Mali, dog sacrifice was unfortunately prevalent, making this insult a popular choice. I was thrilled I could show off my cultural prowess. "How are you?" I started. "Ika kenewa?" "No problem," he said. "Torosite." I noticed out of the corner of my eye that 2 village women had shown up on the clinic porch, undoubtedly to see Monique. They paused and listened. "How's your wife?" "Really no problem." "How's your dog?" Silence. "Have you eaten it yet?" Pause. "No problem." He stuttered and he coughed. Monique moved her hand across her face as if wiping off an offending substance, looked up at me and smiled. It was a forced, fake smile. Mr. Jara grew the same pained look. The 2 women snickered. I suddenly had a sinking feeling in my stomach. Had I confused the joking cousin's ritual? Mr. Jara quickly regained his composure, and the 2 men rambled through some pleasantries before saying their goodbyes. The truck rumbled off, leaving a hanging trail of dust behind it. I busied myself putting supplies away as Monique spoke with the 2 women who'd come for anti-malarial medicine. Once we'd exchanged the ritual goodbyes with them, I turned to Monique, longing to find out what I'd done wrong in the exchange with Mr. Jara. She burst out laughing. "Oh, Fatoumata," she said, "I must ask you something," she said, wagging her index finger and flashing her dark eyes. Do you know what you asked Mr. Big Boss?" Yes, I do. At least I think I do, I said. You are very good at greeting people, she said. You asked Mr. Big Boss how his family was, how his wife was. That was all fine. But then, I don't know how to tell you this. She bent over and giggled, then composed herself. Oh my, I thought, what had I done? Well, she said, it's a very small thing. In Bambara, when you speak of something that's yours, you always put ka in front of the word. Like when you say your house, it's I ka so. But when you speak of a part of the body that is yours, you leave the ka out. Like your hand is I bolo, not I ka bolo. Do you understand so far? Yes, I nodded, remembering this from my language training. Well, your dog in Bambara, she said, is I ka ulu. But you forgot the ka, and then you pronounced it ulu rather than ulu. I could barely detect a difference in tone. You asked him about a part of his body. She spoke softly, leaning closer, though no one was around. You asked him how his thing was. You know, his male thing down there. She searched my face for understanding. Her closed lips quivered in an attempt to stifle laughter. What? I said. And then, she went on, then you asked him if he had eaten it. Monique lost all composure. She doubled over, gasping with laughter. I was mortified. My face burned and my flesh tingled, a distinct advantage of being white. As she came up for air, she grabbed my arm and held on, swinging it back and forth while she laughed. Finally, she noticed my shocked stare, and her amusement sputtered to a stop. Ah, Fatumata, she said, patting my arm in reassurance and dabbing her eyes. This is not serious. We all knew what you were trying to say. You may have embarrassed yourself, but you have offended no one. Thank you. Thank you. I love that part. So I think we have maybe 5 minutes or so if you guys have any questions. Just raise your hand high so I can see it. Yes? So she's talking about female genital cutting, which is still going on in Mali. And her younger sister, Natalie, Monique, she was remembering that Monique was hoping to really educate her family about female genital cutting. And as far as I know, Natalie was cut, because it's not Monique's decision, it's actually her father and mother's decision. And they're still, the practice is very common. But it's changing slowly but surely. It just takes a long time. I could talk forever about female genital cutting, but I'll save it for my gender identity class next period. Other questions? Yes? How did I prepare my water for cooking and drinking while I was there? We used eau de javel or bleach. So I have very clean insides to this day. So what we did is we'd take water from the well and we'd put a panya or a piece of cloth over the mouth of our cannery, sort of like a big clay pot that keeps the water cool that we stored in our house. So we'd pour the water through that, and that gets rid of any kind of weird parasites that are big enough to be caught. And then we'd add bleach into it. And other people who didn't want to drink bleach for 2 years would boil it. And now I think they've got iodine pills. There's a lot of water filtering devices you can even put on a water bottle that didn't exist 20 years ago. So, other questions? Yes? Whatever happened to Korotun? That's a great question. So, Korotun was a friend of Monique's in the village who was beaten by her husband and ended up leaving. And Monique didn't really write or talk about her in her letters. As far as we knew, she was still out in her village. She never came back to Namposela. However, like I said, John and I went back last year, and in Namposela, here comes this woman walking up to me, and it's Korotun. And she is back with Drama, who has since converted to Catholicism and now goes by the name Jeunesse, or youth. And she's got about 9 children with him now. So I guess draw your own conclusions, right? So I don't really know. You know, I had 15 minutes with her 2 years ago. That's all. Other questions? Yes? Francois, Monique's husband, yeah? So the question is, what is Monique's husband Francois doing today? And he is still in Namposela. Very luckily, Monique's family really took her children on after she passed away, and so they've really been taken care of by a lot of extended family and have continued their education. Francois has remarried and has 2 little kids. So we went back to the village. About half of Monique's family refuses to speak to him. Because they think he had a lot to do with her unhappiness and death, and half of her family does speak with him. And I followed Monique's sister's advice, which was no matter what, he's the father. He holds no power over these kids now, and he's their father. So if you show respect to him, you're going to show respect for the children, and certainly for Basile, because that's his dad. And so we went to the village and brought rice and kola nuts and tea and all the gifts and spent a little time with him. Met his new wife, who, you know, seems perfectly nice, not the go-getter that Monique was, and he's got a new family, so that's all I know. Any other questions out there before I let you all go? Well, thank you for having me. I think I don't have anything till like 10:30, so I'm here signing books. Just run up to me. I'm so happy to do it.
And Kris, on behalf of the Wingate community, I'd like to
thank you
for sharing your time with us.
Thank you. Thank you.